we're undergoing a crisis of tarbiyah. That is, we've inherited modes of looking at education and learning and so forth from other cultures and other periods of history.
No, I'm not worried at all. I rely on God, Allah.
Although we've had completely different backgrounds in terms of like maybe you're in the UK European context, there's a lot of similarities. One of the similarities that I've identified is the fact that there is a heavy emphasis in a lot of your work that comes to tarbiyah, right? So the development of the individual. So what does that mean from where you came from? Like, what kind of role has tarbiyah played, and have you found it to be important and crucial in your development?
SubhanAllah, I think a lot of people say, our murabbis as well, they say, our mentors, they say, we're undergoing a crisis of tarbiyah in the Ummah, particularly, in the UK, and I'm sure this is the case all over the world. And that is, we've inherited modes of looking at education and learning and so forth from other cultures and other periods of history, where they look at, for example, the development of the individual as simply learning information, and the metaphor given for this is pouring liquid from one vessel into the next. This was the a common metaphor for how many of us grew up in the last part of the century. We looked at education and learning like this. There's a famous quote attributed to Mark Twain, I think. It says that university is the process or the place where the notes of the lecturer are transferred to the notes of the student without going through the minds of either.
Yeah.
So that's how a lot of us, we look at education and learning, right? And it's spilled over into how we look at Islamic learning and Islamic development as well. Tarbiyah, on the other hand, is what we would argue is what the Prophet ﷺ did, is building people. The Prophet ﷺ came with a message, and he built that message into his companions, the Sahaba, and they went and built other people and until it came to us. Right? It's not simply just the transmission of information, but it's your knowledge, obviously, your akhlaq, it's your eagerness to make a change, your activism. It's amr bil ma'ruf, enjoining the good and forbidding the evil. We have a model for tarbiyah, which if you want we can discuss a bit. That looks at 7 dimensions, right, at least of tarbiyah. So what we want to develop in ourselves and in our communities and stuff. And tarbiyah, by necessity, it's not just learning something. Tarbiyah is more like taking care and nurturing a plant, for example. You give it a bit of water every day, a bit of sunlight, a bit of the right nutrients and stuff, and you can't just do that all in one go. You have to nurture it, and you have to look after it, you have to give it exactly what it needs. So for some of our history, that was carried out by different institutions, right? It might have been in some parts of the world, it might have been the sheikh, the murid, and the murshid, and the Sufi tariqa, and these types of things. Obviously, this is a very controversial example, but there is an element of the good stuff that they did was the tarbiyah. So a person who has a one-to-one connection with his student, his mutarabbi, his student. He knows, for example, this person, he's got a problem of he doesn't have sabr, right? So he knows that that's the thing I need to inculcate or help within this person. He might think that person has sabr, but he's not generous. He's not a generous person, for example. So that's the thing we need to. So you can't really do that with a one size fits all or broad brushstrokes. That's part of tarbiyah, part of looking at a person, trying to develop them. And if you look at a lot of the successful we would argue successful movements to revive the ummah in different places, as you alluded to earlier, they look at that they look at development in that way, right? So you have, for example, small groups that go to retreats, they'll or MSAs, in your part of the world, they'll have kind of halaqas and stuff, and you'll have that connection with someone who's a mentor, someone who's been through the same thing you've been through, not necessarily somebody who's been kind of flown in from a completely different culture, different country, and don't know what you're going through, but somebody who's been like a fellow student, who's like a big brother to you, giving that tarbiyah to you. So
yeah.
Do I feel that the New York police are providing enough protection, or do I have to have protection of my own? I look for protection from Allah.